I think it is now time to bring on our guest for the day, and this is a good segue to bring on Brady Reuter. Brady, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on, Hank? Doing well.
Not much. It's been an interesting series, and sorry to see that your Orioles having a rough one against the Mets, but they've had an interesting year going into the season, and obviously they are in the midst of rebuild. But first and foremost, the one when I think about what the Orioles have done this season, the first guy I'm thinking of is their ace pitcher, and that's John Means. John Means is probably he's going to be the first legitimate ace the Orioles have in a long time, probably since Mike Messina. And by the way, let me give you another fun fact. The last time any Orioles pitcher has thrown a no-hitter, at least a 9-inning no-hitter from a starting pitcher, they had a combined no-hitter in 1991. That
Right.
was Jim Palmer of the
Yep.
legendary 1969 Orioles. So it kind of tells you how little the Orioles are known for their pitching. But let's talk about this great start. I mean, he's got what, a 4.0 ERA and an ERA below 2. I think he's at 129.
Yeah, it's like sub 1.3. It's like really low.
Yeah, it's really impressive. What do you look for this guy going into the next few games of the season and like the future? Do you think this guy is someone the Orioles will be building towards in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, man. John Means has definitely been the real deal, pretty much. Since he came on to the big leagues. So to kind of give a little bit of backstory, he came out of high school and didn't really get any big college offers. I mean, he played junior college before he ended up transferring to West Virginia. He was drafted 331st overall by the Orioles in 2014. And he wouldn't even make his debut until the end of 2018. And to put it in context, the 2018 season was pretty god awful for us. Lost over 110 games, and he's waiting, basically sitting on his couch, waiting until the very end of September that year before he finally got his debut. So then going into 2019, it was kind of safe to say that the expectations really weren't high on him. He was very unknown. Most of the players were unknown at that point because we had pretty much just began a whole new rebuild and we're starting from basically from square one. So he would make his honestly his appearance pretty early because after his first couple of games, he came on as a relief pitcher against the Yankees in New York. He would go on and earn a role in the starting rotation, and he actually became the lone representative for the Baltimore Orioles during the All-Star game. He didn't actually play in the game, but he was the guy chosen, which was a surprise for many, including myself. I really thought Trey Mancini would have been the guy, but I mean, credit to John Means, he definitely earned it.
Yeah, no, Means has been a great story. I've liked what I've seen out of him so far. I watched a little bit of his opening day performance against the Red Sox. He was absolutely dominant. And mind you, this was not a joke Red Sox lineup. I've talked about it before, and I've explained in a few episodes why I had the Red Sox in third place, despite what everyone was saying before the season. The Red Sox lineup can win them some games, and the fact that to see him shut them down, I think that was a little bit of a microcosm of what's to come. And given the Orioles' track record with pitching, I really hope this guy does well. I'm really hoping it's not another Jake Arrieta situation all over again. I mean, you've had some other solid pitchers such as Chris Tillman. Jeremy Guthrie was pretty good too, no?
Yeah, I remember him, especially like growing up as a young kid, before that 2012, 2016 era of Buck Showalter when we were good. We had Jeremy Guthrie, like you said, but also Eric Bedard he had that strong year in 2007. We traded him to the Seattle Mariners. That actually gave us Chris Tillman and Adam Jones, among some other players, in 2008. So I think we kind of won that trade looking back at it. But I mean, Eric Bedard, Jeremy Guthrie, and then Jake Arrieta. So with Jake Arrieta, like we had so many chances we gave to him because he was part of the big, like the fabulous five. It was Jake Arrieta, Brian Mattis, Chris Tillman, Zach Britton, and there's one other guy I'm forgetting, but they're like those five guys were like supposed to be like the future of the team. And I mean, Zach Britton became a dominant closer. That's good on him. But like Chris Tillman was pretty solid for a while. I mean, he between like the Buck Showalter era, he was really like the number one guy, but not a real ace like John Means is clearly showing he's a real ace. So yeah, pitching, especially in Camden Yards. I mean, as you know, it's a hitter-friendly ballpark. Hitters love going there. Ball just flies out of the yards, so it's really tough to pitch in Camden Yards. But John Means is definitely well on his way, honestly, to be. He deserves to be in the talks for the Cy Young and for the All-Star game for not only being in the game but starting in the game as well.
Yeah, very true. And let me pop up some more comments. One from my mom and one from my cousin. Always learn from Hank. Well, Glads, listen, you can learn a lot about from the Orioles from this guy too. Brady's a pretty hardcore Orioles fan, as you already have a sense right as the beginning of this episode. And now getting back to one of the other players you mentioned Trey Mancini at the end of this. He
Right.
had a really good start to his career. I think in 2017, if Aaron Judge didn't have that historic rookie season, he might have been in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. And we all know his story. He missed 2019. He opted out. Like, he probably would have had to opt out anyway because he was recovering from cancer. And to see him make a comeback from this is nothing short of remarkable. I love getting to see those feel good stories of players bouncing back. What do you think of Trey? What's your opinion on the whole thing?
Oh yeah, so Trey Boom Boom as his nickname goes.
I like
Yeah,
that.
he's been awesome. Honestly, he's kind of like the carryover from the end of the Buck Showalter era because so he made his debut at the end of 2016 against the Red Sox. Like his first like second or third at bat, he hit a home run. It was ridiculous. I remember it was really cool. Like watching on TV, but yeah, that 2017 season, his rookie year, honestly, like you see, you already talked about it, Hank. Like Aaron Judge kind of stole his thunder, but he still had a solid rookie campaign. Like um, so yeah, and then in 2019 was honestly like his best year. That was last full season, of course, Major League Baseball had. And then when Trey played every day as an outfielder, and he would spend time between as an outfielder, a first baseman, and DH. Right now, things have kind of been in rotation, trying to figure out where everyone lines up. But yeah, that 2019 season, he hit 35 home runs and drove in 97. So he really was like honestly, he's a good power bat for any ball club. Any competing ball club could use a guy like him. And so, like, especially 2020 last year was a weird year with COVID, but it's tough for him, especially. I know, like, I was watching some of his videos and some of the stuff he put on Instagram and Facebook and the articles he'd written and the interviews he's had. Yeah, I mean, you know, Sarah Perlman, the old announcer for Masson, she's actually dating him now. So, like, I was following her story on Instagram, but they were together for the whole way. So, props to him. And
Yeah,
then, yeah, so going into this year, 2021, he had a bit of a slow start, which is understandable. I mean, the
yeah,
guy had cancer and was recovering from it. So he missed all his reps last year. I was just getting back into baseball speed. But he's actually picked it up a bit the last couple of weeks. He's currently like sixth in Major League Baseball with 29 RBIs. And he's got 7 home runs and an OPS is 7.55. So, it's not like tearing the cover out of the ball like MVP talks, but it's definitely noteworthy considering where he came from. And I might be biased in this, but I really think just him being out there alone, especially playing the way he plays, he deserves to be the AL Comeback Player of the Year, no matter honestly how he finishes. Just him being out there alone.
Hey, no, I don't think that's biased at all. I think any player who returns from situations like fighting cancer or something like that, I think that should automatically get them consideration for that. So I don't disagree with you at all. And one of the interesting things I was thinking about, I think given his production in 2019, I think it's possible that the Orioles might have really been hanging in there longer if he was in that lineup in 2020. Because if I remember correctly, the Orioles were they were in the thick of a wild card race, were they not last year?
Oh
Like up
yeah, it
until
was like
September.
going into. I remember this. It was like the first week of September. They were had that game against the Mets. So they had a 2-game series against the Mets. They split one, and then they had like a 4-game series at New York. Before that weekend, they were like a game behind the Yankees for like the last wild card, and that was the weird like 8 teams make the playoffs into a 2020 season where each conference or each league had 8 teams make it. So yeah, the Orioles were like right there with the Yankees, and then they lost 4 in a row at New York. So that kind of was like honestly the nail in the coffin. But they were competitive. I mean, it was only a 60-game year, but I mean they were competitive with the guys they had. Like Anthony Santander had basically the most valuable Oriole for the year. He was breaking out, had an amazing year. Guys like Renato Nunez, Hanser Alberto, Jose Iglesias, they're not there anymore, but they all had big offensive seasons, which kind of kept us in the thick of things longer than I really thought, but it was fun to watch for most of it. So I mean, if Trey was there, who knows? But honestly, the big thing about him now is just having his presence back in the clubhouse and him back with a lot of the younger guys and just kind of being that steady force of professionalism and being also just a really good ball player too.
All right. Now, before I get to my next question, we got a few more comments. I'm going to assume that that's James using the review and preview account on Facebook. He does that a lot, so that's just my guess. He asked me what's going on with my Yankees. Well, James, to answer your question, to make this short and sweet, pitching has gotten a lot better. Offense is still feast or famine, but they're winning games, so that's what matters. Next up, let's go back to Tom. Tom says he kind of likes Austin Hayes for the Orioles. Seems like a good young player. I agree with that comment. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Willie Mays Hayes, as the nickname goes. Yeah, he's good. So we'll get to him and Cedric Mullins. They both kind of tag team like the center field because both those guys were really brought up to be the center fielder. But so Hayes has been hurt a little bit, but he's coming back. Yeah, he's a really good ball player. He is young, and him and Mullins are both, I think, are going to be the future of the outfield, as well as Heston Kjerstad, who was drafted back in 2020. I think those three guys will make up the outfield for the Orioles for years to come.
Yeah, no, and now getting back to Cedric Mullins, I think that guy has gotten off to such a great start. I watched the highlight of him against the Red Sox. He had that crazy infield triple, which I'm going to go on out on a limb and say that was probably one of the lowest launch angle triples that I've ever seen. So what do you think of what's your opinions on his improvement? What have you noticed has been the big reason for his change of pace? Like a couple years ago, I think he was hitting like about 186 or something, slightly below the Mendoza line. He had a decent year last year, but like now this year, I think he's starting to put it all together. Is he another guy that you think the Orioles need to build around?
Oh yeah, I think he's definitely solidified the role as leadoff hitter. He's been really fast, and like one thing last year, because the last couple of years he had been up and down between the minor leagues and major leagues because he was struggling to get his average up. Like one thing he would really do to try to just work on the little things, he would lay bunts down and get bunts for base hit. Now he's still good at that, but this year he's more of just really good at just hitting like crazy. So throughout his career, he was a switch hitter between the minor leagues and his early stages of major leagues. So he would, bat from the right hand side against lefties. But really, this past offseason in spring training, the hitters coach, the coaches, excuse me, and then Brandon Hyde, they really helped get him the reps to work on just batting from the left hand side of the plate. And I mean, it's really paid dividends because like his numbers are really good against lefties as a left-handed hitter. So I think it's really just like looking at his batting average now, it's well over 300. And he was like the first couple weeks has been over 400, something crazy like that. Like he's just really become the leadoff hitter you want. And he can steal bases, he can fly, as you could, you already touched about the infield triple. He's a great defender too. Him and Austin Hayes both are like great center fielders. Yeah, his arm maybe isn't 100, but like he's got the speed, he's got the glove, he's got pretty much all the other tools you want for a center fielder,
Yeah, definitely. You know what that triple, by the way, this is kind of a silly little tangent I just wanted to get into, but you know what that triple reminded me of? You ever played those backyard baseball games when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah, like on the PC with Pablo Sanchez as like the MVP.
Of course. Here's one of the craziest hacks you could try in that game. Bunt with Pete Wheeler, you're going to get a hit 9 of every time, 10 times. He's that fast. And I'm sure I think I saw a guy once get like an inside the park bunt home run with him. Really crazy.
Wow.
Like, don't get me wrong, Pablo Sanchez is always going to be the GOAT of that game, but Pete Wheeler low-K was pretty lethal too because of that speed alone.
I haven't played that game in so long. I got to get back into that now.
Oh yeah, no. Now, anyways, back to the Orioles. What are your thoughts overall on the rebuild as a whole? Are you optimistic about this? And who are the main guys that you think are absolutely important to keep like 2-3 years down the line once it probably starts to come into fruition?
Right. So with the rebuild, I had kind of mixed thoughts about it. I think generally I'm pretty positive toward the direction we're going. Obviously, at the end of the Buck Showalter, Dan Duquette era, at the middle of 2018, we really had to make some changes. So we had guys like Manny Machado and Jonathan Scope, who I saw his bobblehead here. I still miss him. He was good. But yeah, some of these guys, we had to get rid of them, like him. And of course, Kevin Gausman, Darren O'Day, and Zach Britton, we had to trade them away because we just couldn't afford to keep them, mainly because of Chris Davis's monster contract. But yeah, so when we started kind of new, we really embraced analytics and looking at data from a new perspective, especially with GM Mike Elias. Of course, he was brought over from the Houston Astros organization. Now, I know that comes a lot of negative connotation, but he wasn't really involved with the scandal as much. He was like assistant GM with that. So as far as I know, he hasn't been punished or had any thing come against him, and he's condoned or excuse me, he's condemned. Yes, he's condemned to everything that happened. So um, I don't really think he was responsible. But let's not forget the Astros already are a talented team that he helped build,
Right.
like Carlos Correa and George Springer. These guys and these guys are really solid. So like he was a part of building that team, the good aspect. So yeah, they're also actually introducing a international baseball academy in Dominican Republic. Finally, it seems like for some reason the Orioles in the past refused to really invest in international markets, which if you think about it is kind of crazy because Dominican Republic and some of these other Latin American countries, they produce a lot of talent. Like some of the most talented ball players, they come from these areas. So it only makes sense. You got to put your money there and see where you can get. So in regards to your next question, Hank, yes, you want to rebuild and you have to start from a young team, but you don't want to trade away your entire core because, like, what's the point of rebuilding, right? If you're trying to get a new core and getting young guys coming up, well, if you have some guys that are young and are part of that rebuild, you can't just trade them away for more young guys, kind of like the 76ers, right? Trust the process, as they say. Like, you got to have something there to kind of build around, right? So, like, saying that, I really think some of the guys I got to keep. I've already mentioned Trey Mancini, of course. John Means, we talked about beginning of the show here. Austin Hayes, like we said before, he has to be right there as well. And Ryan Mountcastle, I know Mountcastle's kind of struggled the first couple of months into this year. They're still trying to figure out where to put him in the field, but he's still a young guy, and he's proven he's a solid hitter. We got to keep him in the lineup, and we got to build with
Right.
him as part of the team. And then Anthony Santander, I'm kind of on the fence with. He was a Rule 5 guy. He really kind of came into his own the last couple of years. I think he could be like the third or fourth outfielder down the road. And saying that, for some of the young guys coming up, one of the outfielders I just mentioned was Heston Kjerstad. He was drafted in the 2020 draft, number 2 overall. So I think Kjerstad could be part of that outfield along with Hayes, Mullins, and Santander, kind of all together. And then, of course, I'm sure you're well aware of Adley Rutschman, right? He was number 1 overall
Yeah.
in 2019. Yeah, I guess people are kind of comparing him to Joe Mauer or even Matt Wieters. Of course, Matt Wieters was supposedly the switch hitting Jesus Mauer with power that they really saw out of him.
Yeah, I liked
Wieters
him.
had a decent career, but I guess never lived up to the hype.
Yeah, I remember. I liked him. He was a pretty solid catcher. I really thought he was going to be there for a while, but I guess that never really panned out. And Rushman, that's the guy whose name I remember hearing. They drafted him like number 2. I think it'll be interesting to see how he pans out because, I know there's a lot of hype with these draft picks, but then again, the draft is also a crapshoot. So
Oh
who
yeah,
knows? It's 50-50. And you make a really solid point too. There's been a lot of teams. The Marlins are another example of teams that have had a lot of prospects and then they just trade them and then they rebuild a rebuild. Like anytime there's any little semblance of good coming out of their team, it's like they set themselves on fire. So yeah, you want to
yeah,
avoid that. And I like the point you made about the Dominican Academy. I think it seems to me that the Orioles have been trying to really adapt to the new baseball culture. Because don't get me wrong, Buck Showalter, as most of us Yankee fans know, he had a pretty solid tenure in New York too. He was a good manager. He's a guy that can turn teams around when they're down in the dumps. But
oh
now,
yeah,
as far as his track record goes in the playoffs, that's pretty checkered. And I'm not just talking about the 2016 wildcard team. Watch Game 5 of the 1995 ALDS between the Yankees and the Mariners, and you'll see he made a lot of bad clunkers in that game that led to their loss. But I digress.
yeah,
He's a solid manager, but of course, as we all know with baseball, every manager has their expiration date. So you knew he wasn't going to last forever. And Dan Duquette has another pretty solid record. I mean, this is the guy who he built the 1994 Expos, and that's the team that obviously got robbed of a potential World Series due to the strike. And if you look at the 2004 Red Sox, obviously everybody knows that team was mostly built by, I believe, Theo Epstein. He did most of the work for that team, but then Dan Duquette also got some of the bigger guys such as Jason Varitek, Manny Ramirez, and Pedro Martinez, to name a few. So I think he did a decent job with the Orioles for a few years, but eventually, I don't know whether it was the fact that they were a small market team or whether it was the fact that they didn't realize that the Orioles could no longer contribute, but eventually both had their expiration date and they had to move on. But it seems to me that is it Elias or Elias? I
Elias.
forget. Elias, thank you. Seems to me that Elias knows what he's doing. And to segue into my next question, Brandon Hyde, I think, has done a pretty decent job. I know 2020 is a short season, and I generally don't like to take a lot of stock from that because it was a shortened 60-game season, and you can't really get a lot of like real. It's basically a sample size, so to
Oh
speak,
yeah.
and you can't really judge him off of 2019 because he already inherited what was a mess, right? Like, I don't think it was fair to expect him to come in and just lead them to close to 500, but 2020, the Orioles were pretty competitive, all things considered, under him. And as we mentioned this year, the Orioles have pretty much put up a lot of fights with him as the manager. And I think all things considered, he's done a good job. And even this year, they're not too far out of like first place or the wild card. They're only 5.5 games out of first place as we speak right now. What do you think of the job he's done? Do you think he's going to be here to stay in the long term?
Yeah, Hank. So you talked about, I mean, him and I think the guys really fight for him. They play for him. So obviously, Brandon Hyde was kind of pulled into the team in early 2019 when we were at the beginning of a long rebuild. So you really couldn't expect much out of him in 2019 when we had guys like Richie Martin and Rio Ruiz and Renato Nunez, Hanser Alberto, guys that like really haven't been able to stick around for any teams very long. So yeah, I mean, going from there, I mean, I really think that the guys have a lot of grit playing for him. I mean, especially in 2019, like one of the games I think about a lot. It was really crazy. It's back in July 26th, they ended up winning some like 15 or 16 extra inning game against the Angels. And it was crazy because Stevie Wilkerson, like the outfielder, ended up coming in to pitch as a closer and got the save. So that game was really fun just watching that. Like, wow, look at this. This is so it's never happened before. An outfielder records a save. It was really honestly just a testament. Like, yeah, these guys, even though they're rebuilding, they still play hard. They still try to win, like no matter what. So I think, even last year, like it was a short year, but we were, like I said, we were competitive for a while. And so this year, going into this year, I know we're 5.5 games out. We're in last place right now, but we're in a lot of games. We just don't have necessarily the one or two big hits we need to get back into the game. And we're still, searching on what our regular lineup is going to be and our position players are going to be. But I really think that Hyde is the guy going forward, at least for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. And it seemed to me that he learned a lot from Joe Madden in those few years that he was with the Cubs, and he even had a World Series ring coming out of that experience. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he does. Maybe a few years down the line, we'll see how competitive they become with the Yankees and the Red Sox for years. Like, I know usually you see the Yankees and the Red Sox competing for the AL East. I've noticed this pattern, but then eventually there's kind of a rotation between the Blue Jays and the Rays. Like one of them will end up getting younger. The Rays obviously will be down for a few years. Then they obviously, they're good at developing pitching, so they're not really down for too long. The Blue Jays, they had a short little stint where they were good. They kind of had to rebuild a bit, and now they're right back on track. And they have a fantastic team right now as it is. And obviously, we know the Yankees and the Red Sox with their payroll, they're going to be in it. But the Orioles, I think, right now, all things considered, from what I understand, and it's coming from a complete outsider's perspective, I think they're doing a solid job, and I'm really looking forward to see how everything plays out in the future. And, I wish the best of luck for them. However, I do have one more question for you, and this is kind of a fun question. So
Yeah.
I feel it's hard for me to really talk about the Orioles without talking about Camden Yards. Personally, I've been to like maybe 6 or 7 major league ballparks. I've seen, at least in terms of ballparks for which I've seen the Yankees. And Camden by far is my favorite out of all those ballparks. So what's your take on that on Camden? Are you in the same boat as I am with Camden? Is that one of your favorites too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to put it in perspective, honestly, I've only been to 4 major league ballparks, like just seeing baseball games. Yeah, I mean, Camden Yards, I mean, it's always talked about, but yeah, it's a really fun place to watch a game. I mean, of course, my parents grew up with Memorial Stadium back in the day in Baltimore. And Camden Yards was built in '92, and as the saying goes, it's the ballpark that forever changed baseball because it was kind of the start of the retro era that was taking place. 'Cause before you had the multi-functional like football, baseball stadiums are all big bowl-sized bean boxes that really weren't that appealing visually. But Camden Yards is really nice. Also, I would say because I've been to Fenway Park, I would probably rank Fenway Park as my second favorite. I actually went there a couple summers ago. I watched a Red Sox Dodgers game. I was in the area, so I just stopped on by. But Fenway was definitely a place that I wanted to get to because of all the history and just the iconic view of it. It was really cool. I watched the Orioles play at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. The stadium's all right. It's not bad. I think most stadiums now honestly kind of have a similar feel. Like Citizens Bank Park. I mean, I guess the only downside is in a parking lot. It's just a giant parking lot. So like I do like how Fenway and Camden Yards, and even to an extent Yankee Stadium, they're kind of in the downtown or like the busy city area with a cool skyline in the background. Like right, it feels like right in the neighborhood, right? Now I also been to Yankee Stadium, the new Yankee Stadium, like 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, I don't know if you have different feelings on this, Hank. I don't know if you've been to old Yankee Stadium. I kind of wish I had gotten a chance to go to the old
Oh,
one.
I've been there many a time. I've been there many
Yeah,
a time.
yeah,
I miss the old stadium very much. Trust me. I
yeah.
got nothing against the new place. Don't get me wrong. It's nice and it's beautiful, but like, trust me, any Yankee fan will tell you that nothing compares to the old house. You don't get the same nostalgia of, oh, this is where Ruth, DiMaggio, Gehrig played. The new one, it's nice, but it also feels a little bit like a mall in a fancied up place, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah. I mean, speaking of which, like I just see all kinds of billboards and advertisements there, and I remember like, yeah, it's not the best thing I want to look at, but it's still nice. Like it still
Yeah,
has, they try to
yeah,
replicate the right field, the short porch with it was like 314, I think, or 318 in right field to
yeah,
make it really appealing to left-handed hitters, supposedly. So it still has a kind of cool things to it.
yeah.
And then you guys got the statues out there like underneath the center field fence, right? Like
Oh, you mean
the
Monument Park?
yeah.
Yeah, Monument Park is definitely a place I encourage anyone, not just Yankee fans, but any baseball fan in particular, needs to go to Monument Park at least once. Trust me on that one. A lot of history. And as I kind of told you off screen before the show, I'm very much into history, especially baseball. So yeah, definitely something to check out. You get a sense of how good guys like Babe Ruth, Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Mickey Mantle, etc. were. So yeah, I think pretty much every baseball fan should visit Yankee Stadium at least once, even if it's not quite as good or historic as the old one was.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, speaking of history, like, Camden Yards, just like 10 years ago, they put in a similar kind of feel that Yankee Stadium had, where they had these statues that are put up. I don't know if you remember this, Hank, but like Cal Ripken was, there was a big night. They honored him. We played the Yankees that night, 2012. And it was like a big night where we had giveaways to all the fans as a replica for, I don't have a statue with me, unfortunately, but yeah, it was a cool night where they built 6 statues. It was so Frank Robinson, Jim Palmer, Earl Weaver, Brooks Robinson, Eddie Murray, Cal Ripken. Those were like the 6 Orioles that are in
Yep,
the Hall of Fame. It was really cool. They put them out there, and they're like right behind the batter's eye. And if you know, in Camden Yards, you got the batter's eye, you got that bar up there, and then there's like a little walking area, like a little terrace with picnic areas. They put their statues there. It's really cool. And of course, you got the Babe Ruth statue actually right outside County Yards because supposedly Babe Ruth grew
yep,
up where second base sits in Baltimore, which is really, really cool. And then, of course, you got Utah Street with the B&O warehouse, which
yep.
that's back from, I think, like the late 1800s or 1900s from back in the day from the B&O Railroad when that was put in. So there's a lot of history there, which is really something cool.
Oh yeah, that's why, because it's like new and it has that old school feel. I think that's why Baltimore is my favorite. Although don't get me wrong, I have other ballparks that are on my bucket list. Wrigley Field is among the Wrigley Field might be at the top of that list actually, as is Pittsburgh, PNC Park, and I would also want to go back to Dodger Stadium. I went there like years ago, but I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I don't really remember much about it. I don't even think it was remodeled yet. So that shows you how long ago it was. And Miggy Cabrera was playing there as a member of the Marlins. So
Wow.
there you go.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
And anyways, before I let you go, I do want to ask you one more thing. Who's your favorite Baltimore Oriole of all time? This is just another one of those fun questions I like to ask some of my guests
Oh,
before
yeah.
before the end.
Yeah, no, sure. I would go with Nick Markakis. a guy I grew up watching for many years, especially during the dark days when I was a young kid going to. We had like little league days when I was growing up playing baseball. We'd go to the ball games on like a sunny afternoon. Yeah, we were losing like probably 100 games a season, like 95, 100 games a year. But Nick Markakis was always like that solid player. He played right field for the longest time, and he was a Gold Glover for many years. He always bat like 290 ish, like 292, 293. He get probably average like 20, 25, 30 home runs, but he was always like the bring your lunch to work, blue collar worker, where kind of ball player. He always played hard, and he was a great hitter, and he never complained. He had a cannon for an arm in right field, and he was just a very professional hitter. And I was really sad to see him retire as a member of the Braves. He had that great standing ovation back in 2015. He came back to Camden Yards as a member of the Braves. And yeah, it was made me tear up a bit. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, he was definitely my favorite guy. But between him and Brian Roberts, who's another great guy for a while, this was really going back before the Buck Showalter era. So yeah, Nick Markakis was definitely the guy. And actually, I got his jersey. Let me pull it out for you real quick, just to show you what I'm talking about. Yeah, here he is. My favorite guy.
That's pretty cool. I love it. I could show you a lot of my baseball shirts and jerseys, but unfortunately, I don't think time really permits for that to happen. But with that being said, I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much, Brady, for coming on and taking the time to sharing your insights about the Orioles. I would definitely be more than happy to having you back on for another episode. Hopefully, maybe we can even have you joined on by your good buddy Marty from Intercept Your Lunch podcast. He's another big Oriole fan who I think you and him together on the show would definitely be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, man, we're gonna have to have some long debates about where we're going, and especially with this Yankee series coming up, we'll have to Marty and I will have to team up on you and see how we think we're gonna end up.
Hey, look, I love that. It's a lot of fun, and listen, I enjoy talking baseball. Thanks again, Brady. I appreciate you coming on. Always a pleasure. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. Thanks for having me on. It was a great time.
All right, no problem.